Welcome to Yuma Center. From the nation's capital, we welcome you from 22 states and also from Canada. We're thrilled to have you here tonight for our presentation. Every summer, we have a lecture where we offer the students of Washington Week, our high school leadership program, the opportunity to explore the world, to learn about leadership, and to think about possible careers in public service. Tonight we have Lala Mooney, who I will introduce in a second. Our plan for tonight is to have Lala speak about her family's journey out of Cuba, and then we will have a question and answer period from our panelists. Our panelists tonight are some of the Washington Week high school students who are from the East Coast. The others could not join because of time differences. So we will have our question and answer period at the end. And then at the very end, we will show you a couple of slides about upcoming events at Yuma Center. We will entertain 5 questions from the girls, and then we will end our evening. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight. So Lala Mooney was born in Cuba. She is one of 14 children of Manuel and Eloisa Suarez. She was put in prison in 1961 by Fidel Castro's government, together with her father and 2 sisters. After 2 months, the family managed to be released from prison, and they came to the United States. Lala Mooney is the mother of Congressman Alex X. Mooney, representing District 2 of West Virginia. And now I would like to turn the program over to Lala Mooney, who will share her story with us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you to the Yuma organization for giving me this opportunity. And thank you to all of you that are listening. I just recently published a book, Living Cuba. And people say, why did you write? Well, I was in prison in Cuba for 2 months. My uncle died in prison, and my other uncle fulfilled 7 years of a sentence. And I think it's important that people hear my story, the real life story. And it starts like this. When the Bay of Pigs invasion took place, this was an invasion planned by the CIA, but carried out by Cubans. Fidel Castro sent his militiamen out to gather prisoners. And I always start with a question. In 2 days, how many prisoners do you think the militia picked up? How many people do you think they could pick and put in prison in 2 days? Think of a number. And now I'll tell you. 100,000 people were picked up. We never thought this was going to happen that way. And this is what happened. We were sitting in the living room in my house, and all of a sudden, the militiamen, I look out the window, and they were starting to come into the house by all the doors. And with guns and arms, they told all of us to go and sit in the living room, and they checked the whole house. And now I'm going to tell you all that what happened next. My speech will be 3 steps. First, leaving Cuba. Second, the life in the United States. Second, returning to Cuba. So back to the militiamen. They had the house all surrounded. They made us sit in the living room, and they checked all the house. Well, My boyfriend had given me a gun that very morning. And lucky for me, I had asked one of my dad employees to bury it. They never found it. If they had found it, my dad would have been executed. As the militiamen walked through the house and through the garden, I could see their boots going on top of the area where the gun had just been hidden. Fortunately, they did not find it. However, they said, everybody above 12 goes to prison. So they put us all in a van and they took us to a local prison that very same day. My mom had just lost baby number 15 and she was bleeding, so we were able to convince them to let her stay home. And then we went to this local prison where they kept bringing more and more prisoners all day long. How did they have 100,000 prisoners? They didn't have enough prisons. So what they did is they picked up big army barracks, castles, and they put prisoners there. My dad, initially we went to a temporary prison, but then we were transferred to a real prison. And my dad was put in the entrance at the fortress of Havana called La Cabaña. It was used as a military installation for 3,000 soldiers. And at this moment, they put there 6,000 prisoners. My dad at night could hear the executions. He could see ahead of time the list of those that they were going to be executed that night. And when he came to America, he wrote a book about it, which is going to be is part of my book. Me and my two sisters went to a women's prison called Guanabacoa in the outskirts of Havana. And there we had the biggest scare of our life. A group of prisoners there they were transferring them to a much worse prison, and they were refusing to go. So what did Fidel Castro's militia did? First, they organized a visit on Mother's Day, a visit, and the mothers came to visit us, and we were all happy. We never occurred to us what they were going to do next. They reserved this group of women for the last group to visit with their mothers. And then, once they had separated them from the other prisoners and the mothers left, they brought fire trucks and firemen with water hoses to force them to get out and go into the van. The women were screaming and yelling. I could see them from the top of my bunk bed. And then one of the women was pregnant. And do you know what they did, those firemen? They would aim the hoses at her stomach to try to kill the baby. And the most beautiful thing is that all the other women surrounded her, and then, fortunately, the baby did not die. And the mother made it to the other prison. But it made us realize that communists will stop at nothing to accomplish what they want. We were also told that on the way there, one of the women hit her head against the van and bled to death. So we were very scared. We realized that Fidel Castro's government would do anything. At the same time, we started hearing that Fidel Castro's government had missiles aimed at the United States. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Once we were there, my dad in the men's prison, me and my sisters in the women's prison, someone came and told my mom that my dad was a professor at Villanova in Cuba. There was a Villanova in Cuba, similar to the Villanova here, the same priest and everything. And my dad was a professor there of engineering. So they came and they told my mom that in the laboratory where my dad had a little sugar mill, his students have hidden guns, ammunition, and plastic to make bombs. And if that were to be found out, we knew my dad would have been executed. Fortunately, they didn't find it while we were in Cuba. However, my mom just fell apart and became catatonic, which means she just lay down there, couldn't move, couldn't talk, nothing. So we took her to the hospital, and then they said that they had to give her electroshock. So I took my mom to the electroshock area, and they put wires in her head, and they gave her those electroshocks, and they got her out of her state of catatonia. But we realized that this was very, very hard, and my mom could die anytime. So fortunately, we had a connection with the Brazilian embassy, and the Brazilian embassy put pressure on Fidel Castro's government, and my dad was let go out of the jail. And we were able to come to America in a ferry boat. So first my dad left, then all of us left. I don't know if I told you already, but we are 14 brothers and sisters. So there was quite a big number to leave. Some of them have left a little bit earlier. So actually there were maybe like 10 left. And then we were able to come to the United States. However, not everybody in my family was that lucky. I have one brother, one uncle, Ignacio, and he died in prison. And I have another uncle, Patricio Suarez, who fulfilled 7 years of a 20-year sentence. And the good news with him is that his son, Patricito, was able to ransom him. It's one of the very, very few cases in all the 50 years that of communism that someone has been ransomed. And you will read that in the book if you are able to order the book. The book can be ordered for $5. I'll let you know later. So then we came to America. We always carried Cuba in our hearts. Initially, we thought we would go back soon. This was 1961. So I was 19 years old then, now in my late 70s, never to go back permanently. Life in the United States was wonderful for me. I had lots of opportunity. I married my college sweetheart. I was the first one in my family to marry an American, first one of the brothers and sisters. And I went to Cal University where I played chess. And my husband-to-be was a chess player, Vincent Mooney. So I married him and I had 4 children. Two of them are college professors. Vincent teaches engineering at Georgia Tech. Margarita, who's the youngest one, is a professor at Princeton Theological Seminary, and she teaches psychology and religion. I have Patrick is my businessman, and he's in the computer field. And then Alex is the one that entered politics, and he's now a congressman for West Virginia. Before that, Alex was elected, we lived in Frederick, so he was elected to be a senator in Frederick. And then I want you to hear this. He was 26 years old when he started running, 27 years old when he was elected. Only 3 senators in Maryland had been elected that young, and the other 2 were sons of politicians. So I'm very proud of my son, Alex, for what he has accomplished. And then he decided, decided to move to West Virginia because in Maryland there was some difficulty and he was redistricted. And in West Virginia, in a year and a half, he got elected congressman. And one of his biggest accomplishments in West Virginia is that he has supported the idea of the right to life. And he encouraged and supported many of the local senators and delegates. And last year, West Virginia passed a referendum where the government does not have to pay for abortions. And it's a referendum by vote. And I'm very proud of this one accomplishment that I feel he was very influential for the right to life. Other in my family in the United States have also been in politics. And I'm going to ask the people who are supporting me maybe to put the slide of my all the family members that are now on elected office. One of them, okay, here comes the slide. Let's see, first will be this is the picture of the 14. Okay, this is the picture, the one at the left. You can see 3 family members that are on elected office. The one in the middle with his arms open is my son, Alex, and he's the congressman. This was taken a couple of years ago. The one all the way to the right is Xavier Suarez. Xavier was elected mayor of Miami in 1985. First Cuban mayor of a big city. He now is a commissioner of all of Miami-Dade, and this very year he's running for mayor of Miami-Dade. And that is going to happen, the primary is going to happen in August 18, and then the general is in November. So he's still fighting there. Now, all the way to the left is his son, Francis. And guess what? Francis is now the mayor of downtown Miami. So he's a city of Miami, and Xavier is running for Miami-Dade, the whole county. Here at the right, you see a picture of Francis, and you might have seen Francis a lot lately because of what Miami is going through. And before that, he did have coronavirus and was quarantined. So these 2 members in Miami are very active. And my son, Alex, I think was very inspired by his uncle, Xavier Suarez. At the bottom is my son, Alex, with his wife and the 3 children. This is the photo they used for the election 2 years ago. They're a little bit bigger now. And they live in West Virginia. So that was the reason why I moved to West Virginia. Alex's wife is Grace, and she's a neurosurgeon. And the kids are Lucas, Cami, and Gabi. So I think the beauty of America, if is that we have been able to come, we have been able to succeed, we have been able to put our ideas to work. And I think all along the way, this belief in God, this belief in the process of the democracy has been fantastic for us. Now I'm going to change and I'm going to talk about returning to Cuba. Maybe we can put the pictures of Cuba at this point. Brett. Okay, this is a family reunion in Miami last summer. These are all the descendants of my mom's and her 4 sisters and 2 brothers. There are about 250, and we're color coded, as you can see. Let's see the next picture. Okay, this is a very interesting picture. One of the things in 1999, the Pope went to Cuba and he said, let Cuba open to the world and the world open to Cuba. So my family started making trips to Cuba. Over there, you see at the bottom, 2 of the churches in Cuba and the way we found them. One of the things that communism does is they don't allow anybody to fix their churches. Communism looks as religion as the enemy. So the one in the right at the bottom is the church from the sugar mill. That's the way we found it, totally destroyed. And the beautiful thing is that we were able to gather money and fix it. And there you see at the top, the church now rebuilt. How did this happen? It's a miracle, because they would not allow any churches to be fixed. But the good Lord was in our side, and we gathered the money, and we were lucky to do that. So that is a positive result of our visit. And now I want to move to something more sad and more negative, which is how the Cuban government controls the people. And I'm going to talk about the ration card. We have a picture there that shows the amount of food people get a month. But I'm going to show you personally exactly what it is. So if I can show you now myself, this is a piece of chicken. You see it, right? This is what a family of 2 is allowed to have for a whole month. The ration card tells them the amount of food they can get. 1 piece of chicken for a family of 2 for the whole month. Now, I'm going to tell you about eggs. How many eggs do you think a person gets for the whole month? Wait till I show you. Five eggs. This is all the eggs given per person per month. So you can have 1 egg each week, and then you have an extra 1 left over. Then coffee. How much coffee do you think you get per month? I'll show you. 4 ounces of coffee. This is all the coffee you get per person per month. And so you say, the ration card is a joke. What do people do? They don't have food to eat. You know what the answer is? They all steal. They spend the whole month stealing. It's incredible. If you work in a school, each time you pass next to the black bean bag, you grab a bunch. If you work in a restaurant, you steal the mayonnaise. The whole country is constantly stealing. Who do they steal from? The government, because the government owns everything. And the government knows they're stealing. So then you have people telling you, like Bernie Sanders, how good Cuba is. So you figured, how can people be so confused? And it is because Cuba has the biggest propaganda in the world. And they told everybody that everybody there is happy. And it's not true. However, one of the things we have to realize is that when the people go to Cuba, the Cubans cannot say the truth. So if you ask them, they're not going to say they steal. So everybody is constantly worried about food. I have a friend who said, out of 10 conversations a day, 9 are about food. How are we going to eat today? What are we going to do? But that is not all. Now let me tell you about medicine. You have heard people say that medicine in Cuba is fantastic, that Cuba has doctors all over the world. Well, let me tell you. When I first went to Cuba, my cousin, who had been there the year before, said, Lala, for gift to your friends, take 10 aspirins. Put them in a Ziploc bag, and this is the gift that you're going to give your friends, 10 aspirins. Would you believe that? And when I was giving it to them, the neighbors will come through the window and say, can I have some? And it's very interesting because with the lack of food and the lack of medicines, you know an aspirin is very cheap. You know the government could provide the aspirins. So why don't they? They don't because that's the way they keep people controlled. And the same thing is happening now in Venezuela. You can see that in the television and newspapers, how people there are very hungry. But what I had to realize is that part of it is the strategy to keep them controlled. So one last thing, when they don't have any food to eat, what do? They put a little bit of water. They put some sugar. Cuba, you will use brown sugar. They steal it. They mix it. This is your dinner. So I am so glad you're hearing it and that you hear the description. What else happens? We talk about the food and the healthcare. Now the next one is very sad, is the abortions. Cuba has one of the highest abortion rates in the world. And one of the things that Cuba does is the government, if you bring your daughter and she's pregnant and she's 14, 15, 16, the government convinces her and sort of forces her to have the abortion. Even worse, they don't do a blood test to see if she is really pregnant. If she missed a period, they just go ahead and do the procedure. It's called a curettage, where they scrape the uterus. So Cuba has one of the highest abortion rates in the world, together with Vietnam. And a friend of mine was telling me, you know, Lala, if you're pregnant, you already have one child, you say, how am I going to bring another child to the world? What kind of food I'm going to give them? So the government encourages you, helps you, and makes you do it, and you yourself don't have what it takes to overcome that. Then the next very sad measure is suicides. I met a friend, Maida Donate, who was in Cuba working for the government. And she then came to America, got a master's degree at Barry University in Miami, and she published the information that she had gathered in Cuba. And in the late 80s, 1980, 1990, they did a research on suicides all over the nation, because even Fidel Castro apparently was worried by the amount of suicides. So after they did that intensive research, what did they find? The number of suicides was huge, was again one of the highest in the whole world. So what did the government do? The government said, this is a government secret. And if you tell anybody, you go to prison. And from now on, I want you to change all the deaths from suicide to something else. So you can say they drowned, or there was an accident, or it was poison. So what happens is, the data of suicides in Cuba that the Cuban government puts out is no longer valid. You cannot trust what they're telling you. And at the same time, it shows the pain and the desperation of the Cuban people, up to the point that something has emerged in Cuba called political suicides. And what it means is a person who, for example, one case, I think Heidi Santa Maria, who had been very close to Fidel, but had been in the mountains with him, but was so disenchanted that she decided to kill herself. But she killed herself on a day of a national holiday, so everybody will hear it. So one of the things that had emerged in Cuba is the political suicides. And also a former president of Cuba, and their other names. And on the sad part is that even Fidel Castro's older son committed suicide 2 years ago. He jumped off from a window. So this shows the degree of desperation in Cuba. Another measure that's really scary is the prostitution. I'm going to tell you a couple of examples. A friend of one of my sons, a college student, went to Cuba. And as he was walking, this lady approached him and said, you see that daughter there? That's my daughter. You can have her. And he was so surprised, didn't know what to do. He said, no, 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 no. And then the lady, you know what the lady said? She said, you see her little sister next to her, who's about 10, you can have her for this much money. And even my daughter went to Cuba in 1995. And she was in Mexico, and she managed to go to Cuba. And when she went to her hotel, she received a phone call from a man. And a man was propositioning her an offering to be a prostitute for her. And he gave her all kinds of descriptions of what he was willing to do. Well, my daughter was then 22 years old, and she was so frightened. Okay, we just put the light back. She was so frightened that she, in her hotel, she took the chairs and everything and put it against the door. And you know, she never told me. And then just recently, I found out my daughter Margarita is the one who's a professor of religion and philosophy at Princeton Theological Seminary. And she went to the radio and television, and she tells the story. So many other stories of prostitution. And in the book, you read, when I was in prison, one of the prisoners was carrying out with a guard. And then they went to a room. And we were all scared, you know, what's going on. Well, the next day, I found out that her husband was in prison on the first floor, and he was diabetic. And she did that to have the guard buy him and bring him diabetic medicine. And sometimes when I think about it, I wonder, what would I have done? What would you have done? So prostitution is an act of desperation. And even Fidel Castro bragged about it. And he said, Cuba has the best prostitutes in the world. They are teachers, they're engineers, and we had the best medicine. So he was bragging about it. And then the youth organization declared that it was an act of patriotism to be a prostitute because you're bringing money to Cuba. So all these measures are not known in America, or very little known. And that's why I wanted to write the book. The final idea of things in Cuba is how this police acts. There is, in each neighborhood, there's a committee for the defense of the police, of the country. And your neighbors spy. But even more, okay, now those committees are not as active as they were before. You know, things change back and forth. But I was talking to a minister. I'm not going to say if he was a minister or a rabbi or a priest. And this is what he told me. He said, Lala, people carry the police in their heads. They are so scared of being hungry, being put in prison, that you don't have to remind them. They carry it in their head. And every morning, one of my girlfriends told me, you know, came from Cuba, that every morning you wonder, what is the first law that I'm gonna break? Because there are so many laws. And the last one thing I wanted to mention also was that people trying to escape Cuba, many of them die and drown. It's estimated that 75 to 130,000 have drowned trying to get out of Cuba. So then everybody asks, what's next? What do you expect of Cuba? Well, one more thing I wanted to mention was that Cuba also has now sent people to Venezuela. You might have heard it. The number is scary. 46,000 Cubans have now penetrated and infiltrated Venezuela. And they have infiltrated all the organizations, the army, the navy, the hospitals, everything. Even the soldiers or the guards for the president are not from Venezuela, they're Cubans. And the ones from Venezuela are not allowed to have arms. So this is called soft power. In other words, they're infiltrating. Cuba is sending people and infiltrating other countries. Venezuela the most, Chile, Ecuador, and others. You have read about it. So maybe here in the United States too, to some way. And as I see this, I say, what is my hope? What can happen? And I always have to have hope. Recently, I heard the ex-president of Germany saying how he never thought the wall was going to fall. And he said when he saw, after Reagan said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall, a couple of months after that, or I think a year, the wall was penetrated. And he said he never thought he was going to see that in his lifetime. And this is what I'm hoping, that the wall will fall, and Cuba will be free again. Thank you very much. And now I understand that there are going to be some questions that are going to be shown.
Thank you.
So we would like to welcome our high school students to ask questions. And first we're going to go to Elida, who is originally from Virginia, but she is now in Nicaragua, and she has joined us this summer from Nicaragua. So if we could spotlight Elida, that would be great. And she will ask her first question.
Thank you, Sharon. First of all, thank you for your interesting talk. I was wondering, there has been a rising popularity of Marxist or so-called socialist ideology in our young generation today. What would you say has been the contributing factor to this, and what would be the best measures to oppose or prevent its spread? Additionally, could you explain what is inherently wrong with this ideology?
This is an excellent question. I continue to read and hear many politicians and experts talk about it. So I generally just use the more elementary approach that socialism doesn't work. If you look at it in Cuba, it doesn't work. And the idea is to take the power away from individual and give the power to a certain group and try to make everybody equal. And in Cuba, it's been a disaster. So as an ideology was put up by Marx, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't apply to human nature. And what could you do? I think it's extremely important for people to learn the truth and not be fooled, and also to participate in elections and in the political arena. I myself was very active in Cuba and in many locations. And I also encourage my kids to be very active and to participate in the process of the democracy. And I think many people, I have my degrees in psychology, and I have worked really hard one-on-one to learn to listen to people and learn to say yes would like Medicare for all, but it doesn't work that way, you know. So you have to develop listening skills and leadership skills. My son Alex, my son Vincent was high school president of his school. My son Alex, the same thing. And my son Patrick, and they've all participated in the political process. So I encourage you to develop skills to talk to people, to be active in your community, and to contribute to the advance of the real democratic process or Republican process. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response, Lala. We will now move to Georgia, and we will hear a question from Francis.
Thank you, Sharon. So thank you, first of all, thank you for such an illuminating talk. And so my question is, because you grew up in a communist state, how does it feel to be the mother of elected officials from a free democracy like the United States?
Francis, I have never, ever dreamed. I have never dreamed that my son would have been in Congress. 15 years ago, when he started politics, I have once seen one congressman. And this is such an incredible possibility that this country affords people. And of course, my son, Alex, first went to Miami, and he saw his uncle Xavier run, and Alex went door to door and campaigned. And then when he started running for the Senate, he quit work. And for 8 or 9 months, he lived in the basement of his house. He rented rooms, and full time he went door to door and got the support of people. So to me, it's incredible. It's like a dream. And I'm very proud of my children and their accomplishments. And I'm very thankful to this country. Every morning when I go to my kitchen, I look out the window and I give God thanks. And I look at the trees and the grass, and I remember Cuba, and I give God thanks for the freedom that I'm enjoying. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very warm-hearted answer too. We will now go to New York, and Elizabeth has a question for you, Lala.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much for your talk. I've been interested in Cuba for a while now, and you taught me so much with what you spoke today. My question is, what, in your opinion, was one of the most devastating effects of the communist regime on the people of Cuba?
That is a wonderful question. You know, my dad was a leader. He was well known. He was a professor of engineering. And I often wonder why did we lose our country? And now in writing this book, I realize that it was Russia, that it was the Soviet Union that penetrated Cuba. And it seemed like nothing we could do to prevent it from happening. So it's very scary to realize how much we worked to try to have a successful country, and Cuba is a disaster. And I think that's when our belief in God helps us, that we're here in this earth to do what he wants us to do. But also, you will find that the first generation of immigrants is what they call immigrant push, and that we really fight hard and work hard to accomplish what we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response as well. So now we will go to New Jersey, and Grace will ask the next question. Grace?
Thank you, Sharon. First of all, thank you so much for your talk. It was really eye-opening for me, and I can't wait to research more about Cuba. What really struck me was how resilient you've been in this whole process. And I was wondering, how can we, as high school girls, how can we practice resilience in our own circumstances?
Resilience is my favorite word. I followed the very famous psychologist Seligman, who wrote a theory about hopelessness and helplessness and the importance of being hopeful, trusting yourself. And my daughter, who teaches at Princeton, also explores that. And to me, my religion, God has given me that and the belief that I can do things. One example that Seligman has on his book is a lady who falls from a boat and she's swimming and she has to swim many miles to get home. And what does she think? Does she think, I'm going to sink? No. In her mind, she puts pictures of she arriving home on Thanksgiving Day and everybody happy. So you have control on what you think, and you have to work in trusting yourself and making resilient. Sometimes psychology only talks about the negative. Your parents didn't do this, your teachers didn't do that, but you can work at it and work in trusting yourself and believing in God.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lala. It's great to know that the question had your favorite word, and certainly resilience speaks to all of us when we think of the Cuban people who have escaped and are in our country. And with that, we go to the last question. We're coming back south, closer to Washington. We're going to Virginia, and we have a question from Evangeline.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you so much for your talk. It was amazing, and I can't wait to learn more about Cuba from your book. My question for you is, what advice do you have for young women who aspire to do something great for the world?
I have lots of advice. I was a guidance counselor at Falls Church High School for 16 years. And talking about resilience, talking about putting hope on people's heart. I really encourage young people to speak out, to work, to develop skills, to stick out for themselves, to look for guidance, to analyze themselves, get to know what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and then work on them. For example, my son, Alex, who's a congressman, many of his students are very smart. They read a lot, but they have to develop people skills. My students, I encourage them to look at their abilities, to analyze them, and to work on them. So don't just stay home and give up. Find a way to contribute to society, find a way to develop your own skills. I'm big on listening skills. There's a theory by Kharkov called For Better or For Worse. And he says that sometimes a normal person can do more good than a psychologist. Because if you listen to somebody, you help them heal. And then also develop the ability to discuss things. For example, in the case of Cuba, sometimes people would say, well, Cubans, are doing well. So I have ideas, and don't get against the person. Oh, no, they're doing bad and everything. Just try to help them think. Try to listen to what they are telling you. Try to develop listening skills, and communication skills. And have a lot of trust in yourself. I have students, just last week, I had a student, I hadn't seen him in 12 years, and his mother wrote to me telling me how well they were doing. And so trust yourself and work on your skills.
Thank you, Lala. Thank you. Well, that finishes our program for tonight. And I think we're all inspired by your faith, by your resilience, by your hope, and by your challenge to the high school girls here tonight to develop their talents and to serve society. And before we go, we want to announce the winner of a copy of your book. And we did a kind of an interesting approach here. We took the words Cuba Libre, which means free Cuba, and we counted out 3 for C and 22 digits for the U, etc. And we came up with 71. And we went back to our registration list of about 160 people. And the person to register, number 71, is Christina Friddle. So congratulations, Christina, and we will be sending you the book in the mail. And as Lala mentioned, right now, this week, her book is available for $5. If anyone would like the full story, the book is very interesting, lots of pictures. And when we send an email to all of the registrants and the attendees, we will give you her email and give you that information. So thank you once again. Thank you for joining us here at Yuma Center, where we strengthen women and impact generations. And we hope to build the future leaders like many of the women who you heard speak tonight. And we wish you well. So thank you again, Lala. Delightful. And we look forward to having you back. Thank you for joining us. And now we have 2 slides we would like to briefly put on the screen.